Our next session for the morning is What Europe Needs Right Now. Please welcome Kosti Salm, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Defense for the Republic of Estonia, and our moderator, Kevin Barron, Executive Editor for Defense One.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Hello. Shall I sit here?
I'll take the moderator chair here.
Okay.
That's the biggest clock I've ever seen. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us and sticking with us through our tech summit. And I have to say, I'm the executive editor of Defense One. My name is Kevin Barron. And I'll take a minute to say congratulations to Patrick Tucker for putting together this excellent lineup. Yet again, another year. I always tell him, where are the generals and where are the admirals? And he says, they don't know science and technology. I know who you want to talk to. And I always trust who he finds for us. And with that in mind, this is who he's found for us for right now, Permanent Secretary of Defense. So tell me, what's the difference, first of all, between the Minister of Defense and your job and what you do? Because these are titles we don't have here on the United States side.
Well, it's a state secretary job, basically. I'm a civil servant, minister is a politician. I think that is the main difference. And, I need to pull all the weight. He needs to take all the credit. I think that's how it eventually looks like.
Good. Well, thank you very much for joining us, for flying over here. And we've got a good half an hour to talk. And I'll tell the audience, if you have questions in mind, you know the drill. There are microphones waiting for you here. You can give me a nod. We'll make sure to get to you in a bit. Let's talk about Estonia. Yesterday I spoke to the NATO ambassador from Poland, and I have a feeling we're going to talk about a lot of the similar themes. You are a key eastern flank country of NATO, on the border with Russia, in the middle of the war with Ukraine. These are different times, and there are different requests and different asks, and suddenly the world is paying much more attention to the Central European nations. Patrick and I both came from Bratislava last month at the GlobeSec conference, an excellent forum where lots of prime ministers and defense ministers and foreign ministers are really making the case with urgency that, frankly, we don't feel back here, that the United States does not share. I think that's the further east you go, the further you feel that. So I want to have, in our conversation, talk with you about the Ukraine conflict, about NATO, and about perhaps the summit coming up in Vilnius next month, and about Estonia. Every country in Europe, it seems, is expanding their defense budget, expanding their arsenals, expanding their indigenous or domestic capabilities for production. Things are really changing.
Well, we only got 26 minutes.
I know. So, well, you can give us your wish list. I think when we talked before, I said you're coming to Washington, and even members in Congress and their staffers are watching this stage, and we tell people what is it that Estonia wants right now and that it needs as at the top of your list with regards to your own capabilities, and then we'll talk more about all the other topics.
Well, number one, we need to make sure that Ukraine wins the war. Number two, we need to make sure that NATO gets its defenses fit for purpose as it has to be, and as it was 30 years ago. June 2023, where we are now, is probably the most important month of this generation when it comes to defense and security, particularly in Europe, but it also accounts for whole transatlantic security. We need to get it right now because we will not get another chance if we get it wrong this time. The war in Ukraine is not only about Bakhmut or Dnipropetrovsk or other cities. It's about the basic values, basic self-fulfillment for the independent nations and the citizens of these independent nations. It's about the basic fact that your grandfathers fought in the Second World War, that no other nation, no dictator has an say over the destiny of other nations. And that is what is at stake there. We need to make sure that after this war, there will be no tolerance in diplomacy, in the world order for attacking other nations. The aggression as a tool needs to be uprooted. The whole concept of sphere of influences need to be wiped off the human history. And if we fail to do it now, we will just open up a door for the future aggressors. And this is what it's about. Every one of you in this room, including me, and I'm sure including you, have been, refreshing Twitter to, understand what's going on in Ukraine. And you have all shared for the, brave, patriotic Ukrainian soldiers. They are all fighting for this there, and they deserve it. And when we also go to Vilnius, then there is a lot of talk about getting Ukraine to NATO. We all understand when the war is ongoing, then it's imminently, it's very difficult or even impossible to arrange. But in terms of top-level, high historic politics, it's about whether Ukraine belongs to Europe or not, whether Ukraine belongs to the family of democratic, freedom-loving nations or not. Is there anyone in this room who thinks that they don't after 1.5 years of fighting? No. And this is the glimmer of hope we need to give them. There are 0 prime ministers or presidents who haven't had a selfie with President Zelensky in last 1.5 years. But now it's time to also put up the liability sheet and really live up to the promise, and we need to give them this glimmer of hope. If you are successful, then you will get there. And I think that is our historic duty as a transatlantic community.
Well, you just proved my point as with your passion. I mean, the way that you speak about the urgency is in a it's now, it's quick action, but you also tempered the expectations. I heard you say, and as many will do, even if all of NATO members want Ukraine to be members immediately, that's not how it works. It's going to take time. So, but sometime between now and when that day comes, if it comes, what's the arrangement? What are the security guarantees that should be offered to Ukraine? Mm-hmm. I know this is what's being debated in NATO's capitals before Vilnius. What's Estonia's position do you need a document? Do you need a treaty? Do you need some sort of coalition of the willing, something more than the current Ukraine contact group, which arms Ukraine, some kind of security guarantees short of that full NATO membership?
Well, the parameter for success there is very simple, and everyone understands it. What are the security guarantees, weapons, declarations, or whatever you give them? Does it deter Russia? If they have a meeting there at Kremlin, does this thing that we put up, does this scare them? Does this deter them? Now, if we all know this, if we all agree on this, is there anyone who would think that the declaration would scare them or deter them? No. So this is where our thinking coming from, that NATO membership is the ultimate goal, because it's the cornerstone of transatlantic security that has averted the war for 70 years. The sole purpose of NATO is not going to war, but averting the war. That's the whole point of this, and that's why we need to get them there. Of course, the whole discussion gets very fast into the play of words in some sort of declarations and milestones and all this. But listen, that's the reason why we have hired tens of thousands of diplomats to figure this out. That's why we have staffs full of lieutenant colonels to make sure how we get this milestone thing and interoperability figured out. The political message, the top-down sort of vision statement, needs to be something that grants them the prosperity, security, self-fulfillment opportunity for all the people and all the soldiers that have been fighting for the freedom. And that is the thing I think every one of us actually owes them. And we are fairly confident that this can be done. It's a sort of historic task.
So, and what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, that so Estonia wants, and I think the Polish ambassador had said kind of similarly, keep your eye on the ball on NATO membership. NATO is the vehicle that already exists, not some other agreement. Because that other agreement might make NATO membership even less likely, or like you're saying, just not do the job of deterring Russia. Exactly. You don't want any other agreement. You keep the eye on the ball.
Exactly, and there is also an imminent, road that we need to fulfill. Imminent artillery deliveries they need, imminent precision strike missiles they need, longer distance ATACMS, it's on the table, it needs to be delivered. the opening up the debate for the air assets. There has been a lot of talks about F-16s, but at the same time there are A-10s, systems that would be much easier to educate the Ukrainian the pilots in the shorter term. It's also about armored vehicles and everything to make their offensive more successful, because it's the offensive. It's not only about the military success, it's also about momentum. And it's also about sales exercise for all the Western military industrialists. I mean, this is your trade show there, where you actually showcase what works and what doesn't work. For the next 10 years, there won't be any business arrangement done in the armaments world where the first question won't be, were you in Ukraine or not? And if the answer is no, then the meeting will be very short, I guess. So that's an opportunity, and that's where we also plea for the defense industry to stand up on your own footing and follow the market. Demand signal is there. Every other sector in the business world follows the demand, and go do it, and you will be successful.
Before I get to the details of those weapons systems and industry, on timing, like you're saying, then urgency. The timeline for the war affects the decisions that are being made of how to arm the war, right? And whether or not it's giving things like ATACMS or the F-16, whatever the next big hardware is now, that could end the war tomorrow, versus arming it at a lower level and accepting a war that's going to go on for a long time. Just today, the Secretary of Defense of the United States, Lloyd Austin, out in Brussels at the Ukraine Contact Group meeting, said this war, we should think of it as a marathon, not a sprint. Now, that's a statement, I think, that would not go over so well in Washington if Washington were being bombed by Russia and other world capitals were telling Russia, well, it's a marathon, not a sprint, good luck. But that's what we're still hearing that from the West. That is not what I hear from prime ministers and other ministers in countries like yours. Tell me, what frustrates you about the comments that you're still hearing, the divide between of urgencies, and how does it really affect Estonia's ability to arm the war and to rearm itself?
I have to say there is nothing that frustrates us from the U.S. U.S. has been...
come on. There's got to be something.
Again, when Europe is in trouble, then the first one standing up is 6,000 miles away. And that's worth something, and that's what I want all you to know. Of course, there are some misunderstandings, and for our appetite, things might be faster and all this. But all in all, U.S. is doing a great job. It's fulfilling its task of leadership. Now, when it comes to the length of the war, then attrition war is the Russian turf. They believe that they are better in suffering, they are better in imposing the poverty to their own people, and they are good in this, and they are convinced that they will tire the West out. So the longer we are on their turf, the will lower our probability to win is. So the logical conclusion out of that is that we need to move to our turf, that is technological superiority, ability to impose sanctions, diplomatic, political hardship for them, and sending the Russia message that you won't win. I mean, we are so united, and we just not going to tolerate this, and we're going to stand together with Ukraine as long as it stands. And we are also willing to, punch our weight faster if needed.
Well, Estonia has definitely been punching its weight. If you read some of the numbers, I think like 40% of defense budget is now tasked to items going to Ukraine. That's an unbelievable number. Give us an update on, there was the Tallinn Pledge earlier this year, 9 different countries pledging a package of arms. There have subsequently been more, I think just either Estonia or partner nations also, of things like howitzers, artillery, support vehicles. Is it correct that Estonia has given all of its howitzers or has pledged all of them to?
Well, not all. Clearly, we are not lunatics. We know what we're doing. We have given Ukraine a lot. We were the first nation to achieve 1% of GDP of lethal aid. We already did it in the beginning of the year. The reason why we did it was, well, clearly, first of all, to support Ukraine. Actually, we started on sending weapons before the war started. So that was the first reason, a logical one. But the second one, and even more important one, is to lead by example, to send the message to our allies that this is what we need to do now. If we want Ukraine to win the war, if we want them to be successful, then we need to send weapons, not love letters or declarations. They need weapons, and that's the only thing that motivates them, that there's Russia. I think we have been fairly successful in this because a lot of the weapons aid would have been unthinkable in the beginning of February 2022. Okay, we can complain that things are not coming in fast enough and they're not good enough and the state is not, proper enough, but it's moving on, and that's the challenge that we have. It's not to embarrass our allies, it's encourage, motivate, lead by example. That's the challenge, how we need to
So drive that forward. Then what are the challenges now? The U.S. has the same challenge itself. The Pentagon and the American industrial system is not designed to arm at such a pace and such a level for a long time other partner nations. We say this is different than Iraq and Afghanistan. You can give low-level counterterrorism things all day long to Afghan fighters. You can't give tanks, howitzers, jets. These are different items. So what does Estonia see? What you need, or what does all of Europe need to reorient the entire defense architecture to do that in the future? What do you need right now from folks in this room?
That's true. Well, every single problem that the alliance, and I also think U.S. military has accumulated in the last 20 years, comes from underinvestment. Every single one. And the only way to remedy this is, of course, invest more and make sure that we invest into right places. In Estonia, what we have done, we are from last week, our government enacted that for the next 10 years, up until 2031, our defense expenditure will be 3% of GDP. It's the first nation in Europe to do so. So that's a big thing. Out of this 3%, 55% will go to defense investments, so weapons and ammunition. So every single tax dollar that the Estonians put up, half will go to with actual fitness. So that's a message that you can do it if you want to do it like this. Second is about ammunition. We speak about ammunition everywhere. It's needed in Ukraine. Our stocks are depleted and all this. But what we first realized, we started to speak about ammunition already April last year, that this is mainly taken as some sort of logistic back office topic in the militaries. And the strategic attribution wasn't done on the topic. Then we started to speak about the lack of defense readiness. Well, it's clear, if you don't have ammunition, then there is no use of having artilleries and tanks and APCs and fighter jets if you don't have ammunition. But even that seemed like a sort of a professional term of the militaries. And now, and this is, I think, what that has actually sparked the urgency and the irritation in Europe, where every heads of state and government have understood that we are historically pivotal moment when we actually need to change something. And this is the direct translation from the defense readiness and lack of defense readiness. If you don't have defense readiness, then what? You are not able to defend your country. And if you're a prime minister of a country, you don't want to be a conference stage when this sentence is being spelled out. It's embarrassing. It puts a lot of weight to your shoulders. And this needs to be fixed. And I think this is something that has started. It takes awfully long time, that's clear. But we need to start from somewhere.
I can't say how much I've heard this same sentiment on conference stages, here, Munich, Bratislava, that, we're probably guilty of ourselves at Defense One of being so focused on over-the-horizon technologies, and AI and space and cyber and satellites is all wonderful, but this is a war, a 21st century war in trenches. And the biggest thing that you're hearing, people know Ben Hodges, former Lieutenant General, U.S. Army Europe Commander, now practically a media celebrity who's pounding the table saying, you can talk about AI all you want, we need bullets.
Exactly.
We need shells. And not only just shells, the explosives within the shells. These are, like you're saying, things that policymakers weren't thinking of.
Well, the reality is that conferences like this, that focus on technology, that all the guys with shiny suits and nice ties come to the stage and speak about AI, deep tech, machine learning, and all this. But if you go to the battalion commander conferences, well, sorry to say, but many of those don't even know what AI stands for. Their lack is the HI. And this is where the discrepancy is, and this is what we need to remedy. The innovation is not only building a more precise, better, whatever, 2% of the existing capabilities at 50% of the increased price. The innovation is also making 5% inferior capabilities with 30% of the price and 10 times of the manufacturing time. And this is something that has become evident in Ukraine. Who can do that wins. Who can do that will sell more of their stuff. Who will sell more of their stuff will, accumulate more capital. And this is how it works. And it's not an abstract discussion here in NATO or in US or Europe. South Koreans and the Israelis are doing this. Yeah. I mean, right in our eyes, we complain about the market obstacles, everything, how financing everything is so difficult. They are entering into the markets of European nations and US with double the obstacles, and somehow they can do it. So I think that is the benchmark of the success for us. If we want our defense industries to be competitive, then we need to be competitive on the market basis. So we need to provide technologies on the price that is better than the competitors, and the performance needs to be better. That's very easy. It has functioned since the Adam Smith came up with his invisible hand theory in, 300 years ago. Somehow we in defense sector sometimes think that different rules apply to us. No, they don't.
I did not have Adam Smith on my bingo card for philosophers to be mentioned. Well done. Before I go to our question in the audience, I have one last for you, carrying on what you're talking about. Estonia's Prime Minister Kallas, she's got to be one of the most popular politicians in Europe, recently reelected, center-right, and partly because the Estonian people really support, for obvious reasons, increased defense spending at a level you might not hear in other populations, especially all the way back here in the United States. Talk about how public support has shifted and is shifting. Thinking about this audience and this conference theme of support for not just spending increases, but the workforce getting into science and technology and industry. The willingness to do that, the willingness of people in high technology to work with and get involved in things like the military and intelligence, which is not always a natural fit still for the hoodie-wearing coders who who don't think of themselves as military men. How is that evolving and changing in Estonia?
Well, in Estonia it's pretty easy. Everyone understands the threat. Everyone understands the linear connection between the military threat, weapons, ammunition, investments. That's very, very clear. It's much more difficult where you go to you mentioned that the threat perception in the US is different. And it's logical. You should be a little bit insane thinking that Russia is going at you and attack you. But what we need to learn from this statement is not patronizing that, you need to take seriously the threat. No, we need to build another narratives that will tell the same story of the benefits of increasing defense investments. And this story is actually very easy to tell. They create jobs. The return on investment, return on capital is much higher than in many other sectors. The requirement for engineers is much higher, which means that the value-added percentages is much higher than in other sectors. So it's beneficial to invest into defense. Much of the money will go back, especially to the US economy, because a lot of nations around the world will buy US stuff, not because it's good, but it's coming from the US. It's an extremely attractive business opportunity, especially now. When the growth curve starts to go up, And if you miss this, the beginning of the hockey stick, well, then you also miss the stick part. And, well, you don't want to be there if someone else is, getting all the growth. And this is the story. And I think, well, your Senator Mitch McConnell, he made remarks, especially, particularly in this vein, that this is the story we need to tell. And this is how we make the investments more relevant to the people, because eventually politicians are representing people, and they're not going to represent something that their people don't believe in. And we need to do a bit better on that, but we're trying, and I think we are moving to that direction.
Yeah, and you don't have to jump from Estonia to Washington.
Yeah.
Europe has got a lot of work to do in unifying everything from joint production.
Exactly.
Let's go to our audience here. Sydney has a question
Hi,
for us.
Sidney Friedberg from Breaking Defense, and from Latvia on my dad's side.
Close enough.
Congratulations.
Close enough. Thank you. We speak an Indo-European language. I hope you can forgive us. But let me ask, Estonia obviously was hit very hard by Russian cyber almost
15 years ago.
Yeah, 15 years ago. It's amazing to think. We've seen cyber and electronic information war raging in Ukraine really since 2014, and especially, since the invasion last year, although arguably, the cyber Pearl Harbor knockout blow has not happened, as some people feared. Estonia's, the center for NATO cyber in many ways, has the center for it. What lessons learned do you all take away from that for NATO, but also just for your own defense of your own networks, 15 years on?
When it comes to Ukrainian war, I think it's very early to make lessons learned. We might have some lessons identified, but even there, things are a bit difficult to put your finger on. If you have a conventional war where the most effects are being achieved by artillery and or air-to-ground bombs, then cyber is clearly on the backstage. I mean, it isn't driving the narrative there, but it doesn't mean the cyber is not there. Especially in the early weeks, Russia had some really remarkable successes. But I think the biggest lesson that I think we can already learn is that Ukrainians took cyber defense so seriously in the wars before the actual invasion, because they thought that the main front will be from cyber, that they were able to prevent a lot of this thing. They were sort of bolstered against the larger attacks, and it's mainly thanks to the Allied support. Again, leadership from the States. And what you can learn is just take it seriously. Invest, make sure that your people know what the threats are, and this threat vector will be lower. Because I think what will happen now is that one biggest sort of deterrent for using cyber for countries like China's and Russia's was the attribution. Well, they were afraid that they will have all the sanctions and everything against them. Well, there is nothing to sanction Russia against anymore. So there is almost no deterrence for them to not use the cyber against the NATO countries, for example. So it will definitely bring the threshold lower, and well, that's a bad thing. So we need to be much more prepared.
Would you say that Ukraine's been very resilient? Is that a Ukraine thing or something about Western society in general? Are we all more resilient than we thought?
No, we are not.
Patrick has a final question for us.
Thank you, Pat Tucker, Defense One. So NATO, through the Diana Initiative, is trying to funnel money into new IT-focused defense startups. It's a very fast-moving initiative to bring money to defense startups. Right now, Europe is also dealing with a big discussion on future regulation as it applies to artificial intelligence. Do you have any concerns that the European Union and European policymakers might handicap Europe's ability to produce innovative IT defense startups through some of these legislation ideas that they have right now?
I'm not that much worried. One of the good things out of the Ukrainian war is that the European Union has actually emerged like a serious player in defense. It's the first time when European Union money has been put into defense, in ammunition, in all the other stuff. That's a good thing, because like 3 years ago it was forbidden. And people thought that it can never be done. So it's a good thing, because at the end of the day, Europe is more inhabitants than in US, and the GDP is similar. So if they make a crown to them in defense and make it a positive narrative story, growth story, then it will make the transatlantic alliance much stronger. And if EU is good at something, then it's regulating the internal market, making it more competitive, and also, well, frankly, I mean, European Union have money. And if you have money, it's much easier to gain results than if you don't have money. And at least I'm personally very, very positive and have a very sort of shiny outlook for European Union's role in defense in the upcoming years.
Secretary Salm, we're at our time limit. I thank you very much for joining us today at the Defense Tech Summit, and good luck to the rest of your meetings in Washington. I'm sure you have some big important asks all over town.
Thank you. You're doing a great job. I particularly want to praise all the editors in all the news outlets in DC. The work that you have been doing in the last 1.5 years is remarkable. You are upkeeping the agenda and upkeeping the agenda of doing the right thing. The right thing is to win the war for Ukraine and making sure that the transatlantic atmosphere is the safest place in the world to live.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I believe a coffee break is what's coming up next, so join us back here soon. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent.